and reinforce the things that you already have learned, then I think that our time will be well worth it here. And that's my job, that's my responsibility. I ask you to do two things. I ask you to bring with you two things. I ask you to bring your Bible every time you come in here. Your Bible. I ask you to bring your Bible because my job is very simple. I'm supposed to open up the Bible, I'm supposed to read the Bible, I'm supposed to explain the Bible, and I'm supposed to apply the Bible. It's just that simple. That's my job. Now, as I'm doing that, you have to do that as well. You have to look for meaning, and you have to look for application, because if you really set your mind to it, you will see things that I don't. And you will see things that I don't mention. So I want to encourage you to really set your mind on the Word. And let's study the Bible together this week. So I ask you to do two things. I ask you to bring your Bible, and I ask you to bring something else. And I just mentioned it. I ask you to bring your computer. Yeah. I don't mean the box kind of thing. I'm talking about this. That's what I'm talking about. Bring your computer. Because class is very simple. As far as what you do is concerned, class is very simple. It's simply a matter of opening up the Bible and putting your mind to it and putting effort into it, and you're going to learn, you're going to grow when you do that. Now, I say this as well about the class, and this is the only class that we'll have this week, and we only have just a few minutes in here this morning, but I'm used to a lot of participation. I'm used to people speaking up and asking questions and making comments, and if you ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, that's one of my favorites. I love the people that ask me questions that I don't know the answer to, because I deal with it very quickly. I just say, I don't know. I don't know. Used to scare me. Used to scare me back years ago. When I was younger, I thought, well, how would I answer this, or how would I answer that? And you seem to have an anxiety when you're a younger preacher about things like that. And I got over that pretty quickly, because I found out that there are a lot of things that I can't answer, and the longer I preach, the more I see that I don't know. And I'm not afraid to say I don't know. So don't worry about that. If you ask me a question that's pretty hard, it may not be that hard to some people, but maybe it is to you, it may be to me. But I'll just be honest about that. If I know the answer, I'll try to help. If I can't, then I'll go on from there. All right. So I want to study with you this morning about life, and I want to look at the book of Ecclesiastes with you for just a few minutes. The book of Ecclesiastes. The book of Ecclesiastes. And I really want to focus on one verse here this morning, but let's read it together. Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Ecclesiastes chapter 1. And let me ask you to help me out here this morning. Would somebody read for me verses 1 through 5? Could I have a hand go up? 1 through 5. Verse 1 through, thank you. Ecclesiastes 1 through 5. How about 6 through 10? 6 through 10. We'll get that. Thank you, Josh. Thank you. All right, let's listen to these words then. Ecclesiastes 1, verse 1 through 5, and then 6 through 10.
The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also riseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. Hasteth to his place where he arose.
The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us.
Okay, thank you. We live in a time where things are changing a lot. We've seen all kinds of changes in the past several years, especially the past 3 years. Just incredible. I was talking with a preacher that some of you know a few weeks ago, and he said, if you had told me, and he was talking about the world situation, the national situation, and his own personal life as well. He was talking about everything. But he said, if you told me over 3 years ago that certain things would have happened the way that they have, he looked at me and he said, I would have thought, that's impossible. That's impossible. He didn't elaborate on that, but I knew from knowing him what he was talking about. But sometimes we get disoriented. Sometimes we feel like we're in a fog. I remember hearing a man that was in the Pentagon on 9/11 when the plane hit the Pentagon. He is a colonel. His name is Matthew Klimo. And I think he works for NATO now, but he spoke in my hometown. He was talking about what happened that day when the plane hit, and he was directly under the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. So when the plane hit the Pentagon that day, he said you could feel something in the building. He said you could feel the quake or the shake. And he said from that point on, it's just chaos. And he said everybody's trying to figure out what in the world's going on. I mean, this is the largest defense, military, and government defense complex in the world. And something's happened here. And then he said, we're going down the hall, and people screaming and crying out, and people trying to make sense of this. And then he said, it occurred to me, somebody that's been in the military most of his life, he said, this is the fog of war, the fog of war. And if you serve in the military, I'm sure that would make more sense to you, and you can appreciate that expression. But we're in it right now. We're in the fog of war, and I really believe we were in it in 2020. It was hard to see what in the world was going on in 2020 because of all the uproar and all the change and commotion. Now the fog has cleared somewhat, and we're able to see a little more clearly, but we still have anxiety about the future. What's going to happen to this country? What's going to happen to the world? What's going to happen to this country? And what kind of world will our children and our grandchildren live in? And what do we do right now to keep our heads on straight and keep from going crazy in this insane world? Well, I have found that the book of Ecclesiastes helps keep me settled. There's some people that read the book of Ecclesiastes and they don't like it. And I'm talking about people that are not anti-Bible. They just don't like to read the book of Ecclesiastes because they say it just depresses me. Because he just keeps talking about how that life is empty, no matter what happens and no matter what you get or what you enjoy or how life favors you, there's always this dark cloud hanging over you, and that's death. And so for most of the 12 chapters, that's what he talks about. You work hard, you accumulate things, and he says you die, and who gets them? He says, well, you really don't know. I mean, you can make your will out, and I'm sure that several of you have a will, but eventually those things go to somebody, and you don't really have any control over that. And he said, that's depressing. He talks about life and how much injustice there is in this life. There's several things like that we're going to look at here this morning, if we have time. But the reason that this book should not be depressing is because if you read it to the very end, you find the real point that he makes in this book. In some books of the Bible, you get the message from the very beginning as to what that book's going to be about. When you read the book of Galatians, for instance, Paul, as we say back home, lights in from the very start. And he says, here's what I want to talk to you people about. And they had left the gospel and taken on another gospel. In other books, it's right in the middle of it, like the book of Hebrews. In the book of Hebrews, you get to chapter 8, verse 1, and this is one of the few books in the Bible where you find the writer saying, this is the main point of the book. A lot of times, we just have to gather that, and a lot of times we'll read a commentary that says, this is the main point of the book. Or you read a Bible dictionary that says, this is the main point of the book. And I would encourage you to take that with a grain of salt, because if the Bible doesn't tell you what the main point is directly, in some kind of way, then it might be the main point that the commentary talks about. It might be a main point. I don't know. It would just be up to you to try to filter that out. But I can tell you in the book of Ecclesiastes that from the very beginning he uses that word vanity or emptiness. But you have to read to the very end, the very last two verses, to really set this book in perspective. In other words, if you don't read the last two verses, I can see where you would say that this is a depressing book to read. I can understand that. I can get that. You'll learn a lot. But it's not the kind of book, you might say, that would leave you feeling uplifted and feeling good about life. Unless you read those last two verses, where it says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. What is it? Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into what? Judgment. Yes. So that puts the whole thing in the proper angle as far as our outlook on it is concerned. Now, what I'm going to do this morning is to really highlight what he says in these first few verses here. He talks about this vanity in verse 2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. That means emptiness. And then begins to elaborate here. Verse 4, one generation passes away and another generation comes. That's just life. It's just one thing right after another, and it's the same old thing. It's the same thing. But the earth abides forever. And in the Old Testament, especially, the words forever don't always mean without any kind of end whatsoever. And that's not an expression that every time means eternal. Sometimes it means eternality, sometimes it does not. It just depends on the context. And here, the earth abides forever simply means that the same things just take place over and over and over again. It's used, some would say, poetically in that way. So he uses some illustrations from nature. What happens in nature? Well, the sun rises and the sun goes down, hastes to his place where he arose. So what's tomorrow going to be like if the world goes on? Well, the sun's going to rise, the sun's going to set. I know that's simple. But I tell you, folks, the longer that I've lived, the more that I've studied the Bible, it's the simple things that will really anchor you. It's the simple things that are really the most profound. It's not the fancy, highfalutin, big word kind of descriptions that sometimes we preachers want to get into. It's the simple things. Life goes on, and life will happen just as it always has. One generation passes away, another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. And uses this illustration, verse 7, of the sun. Next illustration, verse 6, is what?
The wind.
The wind. So what does the wind do?
Comes and goes.
Comes and goes, blows in this direction, blows in that direction. So what's it going to do tomorrow, or the next day, or next year?
Round and around.
Yeah, same thing, round and round. Verse 7, what's the illustration there? What is it?
Hydrologic cycle.
Yeah, it's the water. The rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full under the place from whence the rivers come because of evaporation and all that kind of thing. There they return again. It's the same process over and over and over again. God created all that water, and it goes through the same cycles every day, every year, all over the world. Now this represents, in verse 8, the fact that man doesn't change. He hasn't changed, and he never will. All things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. People are busy. All things are full of labor simply means that there's a lot of activity going on in the world. There always has been. People are busy. People are pursuing something. They're reaching for something. Most of the time they don't know what it is, really. They think they do, but they really don't. But he says, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. And that is one of the things that you'll see over and over again in this book, is that man is empty without God. And if he tries to fill up that emptiness with anything else except God and his word and serving God, he will just become, what would you say? If he tries to fill it up with anything else besides God, what would happen to that emptiness? What would you say?
It'll still be empty.
Still be empty. Maybe even more empty. Maybe even more empty. But this is what people do. This is what he talks about throughout this book. He talks about money. Chapter 5, he says, he that loves silver shall not be satisfied with silver. It's not going to fill up the void. It's not going to do it. That's why people have to keep buying things. You know, when people try to spend money or make money to give them meaning and satisfaction in life never works. It never works. Because if they make $500,000, that's not enough. If they make $1 million, that's not enough. If they make 10 million, that's not enough. It's never going to fill up the void on the inside. Money in the bank can never fill up something that's in your soul. Can't do it. And there are people that don't make anywhere near that kind of money or have that kind of money, but they keep buying things. So they have to buy this and they have to buy that. It could be clothes, it could be jewelry, it could be cars, it could be land, it could be houses, it could be anything. But they keep buying and keep buying and keep buying. Well, if the first thing they bought really satisfied them, why would they have to have another and another and another? Why? See, those physical things can't fill up the soul. I know you know that. I know I'm preaching to you about things. I told you I'm going to preach to you. I'm going to talk to you about things you already know. And when you think about it, that's the way that the Bible actually works. It takes things that you already know. Most of the time, you already know them. Or at least you have a good idea about them. And then it builds on them. And it reminds you. One of the jobs that we as Christians have so often with ourselves, and one of the main jobs that we have as preachers, is to remind people. I have to remind you. I need people to remind me of the simple and the basic and the most important things that are in the Bible. Because you can get so caught up in the details sometimes that you remember what the real essence of it is. But in verse 9 he says, the thing that has been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. So I wanted to just read you a statement or two here and let you think about this just for a minute. Here's one right here. And this is from one of our gospel journals, the Gospel Advocate, well-known publication in the Brotherhood. But here's the statement that's made. There is no universally accepted standard in anything. Now, he doesn't mean that the Word of God is not the standard. What he's talking about is how evil things have become and how that people just have a mind of their own, they're going to do their own thing. And he said it's gotten so bad that there's no universally accepted standard in anything. I'd put the word anymore in there because, again, you have to take it in context. He's talking about young people. He's talking especially to young people. And he's saying that young people are just in a sea of confusion. He said that young people are in a world that is just chaotic. It's a jungle. And it's every man doing what he thinks is right. Like Judges 21:25, every man did that which was right in his own eyes. And he said it's gotten so bad that there's no universally accepted standard in anything. What do you think about that? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What causes that?
Same thing it always has.
What's that?
The same thing it always has. Self-centeredness and self-will.
Yeah.
God's been trying to humble us from the beginning.
Yeah.
That's why he shortened our lives. That's why he got rid of the ground and being fertile.
Yeah.
Make us work by the sweat of our brow and have a shorter life expectancy. Every single time he punished us, it was to shorten our life expectancy and humble us.
Yeah. Good point. Take us back to the beginning. Take us back to the basics. Take us back to where this all started in the book of Genesis. That's what you're doing.
Kick you out of the garden. Hey, now you're going to have to plow the ground.
Yeah.
Flooded the earth. Now you're going to have to really work hard. I'm going to have to give you the
Sorry.
animals because you can't produce all the crops you used to. And I got rid of all those great plants you used to have where you didn't have to have animals.
Yeah.
Shorten your life each time.
Thank you. Anybody else? Would you say that that's more true today than it ever has been in your lifetime? Would you say that? Oh, I forgot to tell you when that was written. Would you like to know?
Nothing new under the sun.
G.C. Brewer. Anybody heard of G.C. Brewer? Raise your hand if you ever heard of G.C. Brewer. You know we're going back way back now. Articles for Young People, April the 20th, 1939. It's been going on a long time, folks. Been going on a long time. before most of us were born. Let's try another one. You know where I'm going now with this, so you'll not be surprised when I tell you about this verse. Here's another journal. Every man of religious observation knows that the gospel is not generally preached in this country as it was 30 years ago. The gospel is not being preached in this country, America, like it was 30 years ago. Would you say that that would fit in a lot of situations? Would you say that that would fit overall?
Yes.
The gospel is not being preached like it was 30 years ago. Well, would you like to take a guess on the date of this one? Millennial Harbinger. Anybody heard of the Millennial Harbinger? Oh, we're going way back now. June 1856. 1856. I've got a bunch more that are like that I would like to share with you today, but it seems like that, for instance, in the Millennial Harbinger, I noticed in Campbell's life, Alexander Campbell had a lot of troubles in his life, had a lot of trials. A lot of people don't know how much he endured. By the time he was in his early 60s, by the time he was about 61, he had buried 10 of his 14 children. 10. 10 of 14 had died by the time he was 61. He lost a wife when he was about 38 or 39 years old and remarried sometime after that. But he was a very well-versed man, a very widely read man. He traveled a lot. So he saw a lot of the United States, kept up with politics pretty well and the condition of the country. And it seemed like that in the 1850s and 1860s, 1870 on, his son-in-law actually took over and it didn't last long after that. Robert Richardson took over. But at any rate, I've gone back and I've looked at his preface to that year of the Millennial Harbinger. They're carved out copies now. So I believe that was was a monthly or quarterly journal. I can't remember. But at any rate, he would put an introduction to that year. Let's say it was 1863 or 1865 or something like that. He would put just a short article in there about where we are as a country, where we're at in the church and so forth. And just about every year I noticed, he said pretty much the same thing. He said, "It can't get any worse than this." And when he talked about Washington, I've got a copy of something from the Millennial Harbinger that would go back to the early 1830s. And the statement that was made there was this, that if you want to find an honest man, the last place that you need to go to on earth is Washington, D.C. There's no new thing under the sun. There's no new thing under the sun. So let's talk about that. Let's go a little bit further here. Let's get the best commentary that we can find on these passages. The Bible says there's no new thing under the sun in verse 9. Nothing new under the sun. So what's the best commentary on the Bible?
Bible.
That's right. The Bible is. So let's let the book of Ecclesiastes unfold this for us. Let's let the book of Ecclesiastes show us a little bit more about this. So let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Let's begin reading verse 1. Verse 1. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. The cycles of life just keep repeating over and over again. That's true of individuals, and that's true of nations. And so we're going through the same kind of cycles right now. Does anybody want to make a comment on what I just said? I didn't give you a chance when I read those pieces just a minute ago, but before we move on any further past this passage, does anybody have anything you'd like to ask about this? Any question at all?
I still have a Bible from my father left me when he passed,
Yeah.
and he's got that verse highlighted. That first verse. There's a purpose.
Chapter 1, verse 9?
Chapter 3, verse 1.
Oh, chapter 3, verse 1.
Yeah,
He's got it highlighted. That's interesting.
it is.
Yeah, when you go back and look at that, and that was your father's? Yeah,
He was an elder here for several
Okay.
years.
okay. So you know when he was born?
November the 9th, 1937.
37?
37.
1937. Okay, all right. Yeah. Interesting. All right, so what happens then? What is life like? What does this book tell us about life? What are some of the things that he wants us to know here that are not going to change? So don't be surprised and don't lose heart because this is life. Well, let's look at chapter 3. Chapter 3. And look at verse 16. Chapter 3, verse 16. Moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there, and the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there. Chapter 4, verse 1. So I returned and considered all the oppressions that are done under the sun. And behold, the tears of such as were oppressed, and they had no comforter. And on the side of their oppressors there was power, but they had no comforter. Life is not fair. There's a lot of injustice in life. This is very, very difficult to deal with. Very, very hard to deal with. And as a matter of fact, that's a little bit about what I will talk about at 2 o'clock today, Lord willing. Just a little bit about that. But this is a very, very hard thing. It always has been. This is the age-old problem of life. And every generation before us had to deal with it. And every individual on the face of the earth has to face it at some point and in some form or another. But there's nothing new under the sun. All of this is old. It's always happened this way. So in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, he begins to talk about this even more. He talks about all of the evils that are done under the sun. And he talks about how, in verse 8, that sometimes a man loses sight of what life is really all about. Chapter 4, verse 8. There's one alone, there's not a second. Yea, this person does not have either a child or a brother. So he's basically on his own, by himself. Yet there is no end of all his labor. He works and he works and he works. Neither is his eye satisfied with riches. He's a hard-working fellow, and he makes money, but it doesn't satisfy him. Neither does he say, for whom do I labor and bereave my soul of good? You know, I could enjoy some of these things that I've worked to get, but he doesn't do that because he's thinking about what he's going to do next. He's thinking about the next project or the next job. He doesn't even take time to enjoy what God's given to him. He says, this is a vanity, this is also vanity, yea, it is a sore travail. Oh, the inside of this book, I tell you what, folks, used to have a truck that had a cassette player in it. You know, nowadays we've gone way past the cassettes, but at home we had the Bible on cassette, and I think that I basically wore that thing out just listening to the book of Ecclesiastes. I can never get enough of that book. Never get enough of this book. There is so much wisdom in this. I'm telling you, you can listen to it every day. And there'll be one statement, one little statement in front of a verse or one verse, and you'll think about that all day, and you'll think how deep that is, how profound it is. Look at chapter 5. Chapter 5. There's injustice in the world. Now this is the most powerful, the most rich and wealthy, and the most wise king on earth. But he had to admit, there's nothing that I can do about it. There were things that he couldn't change. With all his power, with all his wisdom, with all his money, there were things that he couldn't change. Chapter 5, verse 8. If you see the oppression of the poor, and the violent perverting of judgment and justice in a province. Marvel not at the matter, for he that is higher than the highest regards, and there be higher than they. Does anybody have a New King James Version? You better read it from the New King James. You are. Would you read the New King James Version, verse 8?
That's chapter 5.
Chapter 5, verse 8.
If you see the oppression of the poor and the violent perversion of justice and righteousness in the province, do not marvel at that matter. For high official watches over high official, and higher officials over them.
Yeah, that last part is a better translation. That's a better translation. I thought for years that when it says he that is higher than the highest regards, that would be God. But you notice that's in the title, he that is higher than the highest. The New King James is actually a better translation there. It's talking about officials that are over people, but they're officials that watch over them, officials that watch over them. What he's talking about there is that there is oppression and there is injustice. There's corruption at different levels of government. And here he says, when you see that, don't be shocked. Don't marvel at the matter. Yeah, you're going to get mad. Yes, sometimes you're going to fuss and fume about that, and I think sometimes we have to blow off a little steam. I'm not criticizing you because of that, because we all do it. But he's saying, don't let that cause you to lose faith. Don't let that shake you to the point that you lose sight of what you're really here for. It happened then, it's going to happen today. Chapter 5, beginning at verse 10, that's where he talks about wealth and our attitude toward wealth and how we really ought to look at it. Verse 10, we've already quoted that, he that loves silver shall not be satisfied with silver. Verse 11, when goods increase, they are increased that eat them. And what good is there? What good is there to any kind of possession? Look at it, verse 11. What good is there? What does verse 11 say?
It's going to get eaten up, in essence.
Yeah, and what does he say the owners can do with it? When you buy something,
Just see it.
you gotta look at it. you look at it, you see it, and you like it, and you gotta have it. And after you get it, what good is it to you? Well, you might use it. He's not denying. He knows that. This is a wise man. He knows that you can use it. He knows that you're going to get some enjoyment out of it. But after that, a lot of times, about the only thing you do is look at it. And you don't look at it that often. Oh, things have never changed. They've never changed. Well, as you go through this book, as you keep going, I want you to notice in chapter 7 something. Chapter 7. Chapter 7, I want you to notice verse 14. Life is unpredictable. You get up in the morning, and you don't know if it's going to be a good day or a bad day. You pray that it'll be a good day, but you don't know. Something may happen when you get in your car. You may get a phone call, you may get a text or an email. Thought may come to your mind, something may happen that just completely turns that day around. On the other hand, you may get up in the morning, you may not feel that good, you may be down and depressed. You may just have a gloomy outlook on the day and just kind of dread getting into it. And then what do you know? Somebody sends you a message that really perks you up. You think about something that gives you incentive. Life is unpredictable. So with that in mind, since you don't know what's coming next, what's our outlook supposed to be? How are we supposed to feel about this thing we call life? Well, look at verse 14. In the day of prosperity, do what?
Be joyful.
Be joyful. Enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with that. So if you're having a good day and God has blessed you, there is nothing wrong with enjoying that. You don't have to beat yourself up and punish yourself, and you don't have to get some bad news that day just to think that you're doing what's right. There'll be enough bad news waiting the next day or around the corner. In the day of prosperity, you be joyful. And, he said, but in the day of adversity, do what?
Consider.
You need to think then. You need to think. That's when you need to be more serious in your outlook. Now, it's interesting to me what God says here. God also has set the one over against the other to the end that man should find nothing after him. God designed life like that. God doesn't want you to know what kind of day you're going to have next, so that you'll trust in Him. So that no matter what happens, good or bad, you will trust in Him. Boy, that's a deep verse. That's a powerful verse. That will help you. I tell you, it makes me want to say that what we all need to do is just take that verse and copy it and put it on the bathroom mirror or put it in the vehicle somewhere. But if you do that, you need to do that with just about every verse in this book, because every verse in this book is that powerful, is that meaningful. So, in the book of Ecclesiastes, going on through this, then you go through it, and the Bible talks about this process that we call life, and this experience that we call death. And it ends up again, Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13 and 14. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God to bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Do you have anything as we close? Any question, any comment? Feel free. I told you I wasn't going to preach, and I was going to teach a class, and I wanted you to participate, and I've just kind of gotten on the roll here. But anybody have anything before the class is getting here? Go ahead, please.
Just a small part of that, I've noticed recently and reminded that 3:13 and I think it's 5:18 says basically, just remember that the things that God's given you in life, enjoy the food, enjoy the drink. This is your portion in life. It's God's gift to you.
Yes.
Of course, we have other responsibilities, but enjoy what you have.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Thank you. And here's a man who had enjoyed everything. I mean, he is wealthy beyond imagination. He said, I've tried it all. He said, I had the maids and the maidens and the men servants. I had live singers and instrumental music. I had the best of food, and I bought land, and I planted gardens and ponds and all that kind of thing, silver and gold. I had it all. He said, when it boils right down to it, there's nothing better for a man than he should eat and drink and enjoy the good of his land. So, if you can enjoy a meal, why do you need $1 million? Why do you need something that's fancy out there? The best pleasures of life, as far as physical pleasures are concerned, the best pleasures of life, according to this man, are the simple ones. The simple ones. Just eating and enjoying a good meal. You don't have to spend a lot of money for that. I don't know about that. These days, it's kind of go ahead, Mary.
I have a verse I want to read. He who quarries stone may be hurt by them, and he who splits wood may be endangered by it. And beside it I have written, Eugenia Crafton, July 15, 2015.
Yeah.
He cut his finger off.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you can laugh about it. Yeah. Enjoy those things, folks. Enjoy those things. Well, I've enjoyed studying with you, so I'll stop right here, and thank you so much.